We did a discussion about it. It's there on YouTube. But that was from my room. So this is the first physical event, in-person event happening since I published the book in December 2019. I'm happy for this. It was COVID-19 in 2020 that distracted me from doing such activity. And then time went on very quickly with some other things. So still more of gratitude to Sister and Tangaza University for granting me this chance to simply even give an overview of what is the book about, not necessarily going in depth on some of the topics there, but just have an idea that there is a book with such issues. From there, other things can happen later. We contemplated having further discussions, have further engagements. The book is wide, it covers so many topics. So, in terms of my titles, I started working as a journalist in 2010 in South Sudan. First as a trainee, and then my first contract was in January 2011, whereby I took up the role of deputy news editor, stroke news reporter at Radio Bakita. Bakita is a Catholic-owned and Catholic-run news. It's a radio station. So we were doing news and other programs. I was in charge of the day-to-day activities on the radio, as far as news was concerned. My chief editor was not present some of the times, most of the time. And then I studied law from August 2011 to the present. I'm a student at the Catholic University of South Africa. Though I have not graduated, I've reached my final year. So combining the knowledge of law and my years of practice in the broadcast and sometimes also in the print media and others, I found myself well qualified to put my ideas and my understanding of the issues into a book. That has been widely appreciated so far. I'm happy that this event is happening here. That's we can also benefit from what has happened by the fact that I've done this. I think this is not the main issue now. We can just proceed. Then if there are things I will answer later. The introduction, the person, what may be there. Some things are about me very much on Google and YouTube. I had a website. The website is not currently with my domain name, but since I did not pay for it, it has switched to WordPress or something. So you can still get information about me on WordPress with what I used to do. And then I intend to talk briefly about what the book entails, and then the topic of the day, that is the right of access to information, as the matters are contained in the book, and we decided to narrow it to one topic, that is right of access to information, laws, achievements, challenges, and opportunities therein. And I would expect that your questions, your concerns are towards that. Because if we were to talk about freedom of expression, human rights of South Sudan, since I'm South Sudanese, we can have so many things to talk about, but then it would be beneficial that we narrow the discussion to what we are here today. The book full title is Freedom of Expression and Media Laws in South Sudan, Details implementation level, critiques, and recommendations for reform. This is clearly here. The subtitle is and it has 4 chapters. The first chapter is about the regulatory body, that is the Media Authority. We have the Media Authority Act in South Sudan 2013. And then the second chapter is about right of access to information laws. It is about the Right of Access to Information Act 2013. Then the fourth chapter is about broadcast sector. It's the right of access, it's called the Broadcasting Corporation Act 2013 also. And I concluded with the fourth chapter being recommendations. So we have some important laws I mentioned in the book that start with the Transitional Constitution of the Republic of South Sudan 2011. There are some laws, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is the African Charter, and then the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. So the International Charter of Human and People's Rights is of 1981. And then I would like to mention this for the benefit of the South Sudanese also here who find it interesting. The Article 24 of the Transitional Constitution of the Republic of South Sudan states that every citizen shall have the right to the freedom of expression, reception and dissemination of information, publication and access to the press without prejudice to public order, safety or morals as prescribed by law. 2. That all levels of government shall guarantee the freedom of the press and other media as shall be regulated in a democratic society. And that the third one is that all media shall abide by professional ethics. The background of the enactment of those 3 laws goes back to Schedule A, paragraph 45 of the Transitional Constitution, that gives the national government exclusive legislative and executive powers on national information, publications, mass media and telecommunications utilities. And I was actually present when the Office of the President announced signing the laws into law. It was a press conference I attended in Juba in 2014. So the laws have been there for some time between the national legislature and the Office of the President. And some people even said they got lost. Even some people say some alterations have been made. So it is just good that somebody like me has been able to follow these issues critically and in a more detailed manner. That I went further than writing simply articles in the newspaper. I was working for Citizen newspaper at that time. Citizen newspaper and another later when I was doing some follow-ups in relation to the implementation of those laws. So that I read this state and published in a book is good. And people back home there will benefit from it a lot, as well as others who are concerned outside. So since I've not been there since I published the book, and I intend to go there soon, I believe this will be a good thing for us to engage on. That's why the matters are concerned. Because freedoms are not only for people who call for it. Because some of the people in some of those positions in government and others, they are not able to say some things, but they need those freedoms on their day-to-day activities, on their dealings. So just because some of them are quiet doesn't mean they are against it. Just they are not in the capacity to look for it. table this with some issues. And then the table of contents is good for you to get it clear here. I'll go through it very fast. So the table of contents here in the book, starting with the first chapter, I have the Media Authority Act, intro and purpose, the Media Authority establishment and structures, powers of the Media Authority, funding and reporting of the Media Authority, frequency planning and licensing, general licensing conditions, specific license conditions, Media Appeals Board, miscellaneous provisions, criticism of the Media Authority Act versus the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. I think I need to make this clear to some people who might know. The laws are there in South Sudan, but there are concerns about how to improve them, how to reform them. So, through the peace process, some improvements have been suggested, and they are going to be done in the laws. So, this is why I included this part of the headline here that handles those reforms that are suggested in the agreement. So the agreement talks about reforming some parts of the Media Authority Act 2013. And so those of you in Kenya here, you may remember when you had the Muslim Party. You could have politicians agreeing on something to change certain things, to change certain laws. So this is what has happened, that the people here have agreed to make some reforms in some of the laws and institutions, and some of them happen to be in the media. And the agreement also has been incorporated into the Constitution of South Sudan. So from the agreement being incorporated into the Constitution, still, for people to understand the history of how these reforms are suggested, I decided to put this here. So this is in page 83. And then in page 85, there is the Media Authority versus the media in South Sudan. Then there is the unfulfilled obligations of the Media Authority. Then there is the Media Authority versus the National Communications Authority. Then there is blocking of websites. There is the National Security Service versus the media. Then there is South Sudan and the United Nations Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists and the issue of impunity. And then there's notifications. That's the end of chapter 1. Chapter 2, which is about what we're discussing today mostly, is titled The Right of Access to Information Act, Intro and Purpose. Right of Access to Information, measures to promote transparency, exceptions, Information Commissioner, enforcement by the Information Commission, internal review of decisions, miscellaneous provisions, criticisms of the Right of Access to Information Act versus the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. Then there is the Information Commission versus the Right of Access to Information. Then there is the Information Commission versus the Media Authority and interpretations. Then chapter 3, the Broadcasting Corporation Act, intro and purpose, establishment and guiding principles, structures, composition, and powers of the Broadcasting Corporation, funding and revenue of the Broadcasting Corporation, accountability of the Broadcasting Corporation, miscellaneous provisions, criticisms of the Broadcasting Corporation Act versus the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan, achievements and challenges of the Broadcasting Corporation, the South Sudan Broadcasting Corporation versus migration from analog to digital, and there is the Broadcasting Corporation versus the Media Authority. Then there is interpretations, And then the final chapter, that is chapter 4. Recommendations to ensure freedom of expression, right of access to information, and media freedom in South Sudan. Page 189, and then the global. That is what is there in the content of the book, the table of contents. And I would like us to move so quickly to the part about right of access to information. And as we go there, let me start by quoting Pope Francis, because this is so important in relation to corruption and how the right of access to information is important on matters that we're dealing with. So it will make sense soon. He said once in 2019 that corruption undermines the dignity of the person and shatters all good and beautiful ideas. All of society is called upon to make concrete commitment to combat the cancer of corruption, which, with the illusion of quick and easy profits, in reality impoverishes everyone. When we deal with matters of right of access to information, and this has been recognized in the laws that are cited, including the Right of Access to Information Act of South Sudan, 2013, but the act has been drafted to allow fulfillment of human rights and combating corruption. So, by accessing information, it is possible, it makes it easier to fight corruption. When you don't have information, you can't fight corruption. And it can be difficult. And matters of also fulfillment of human rights, in the sense that human rights involves also things that corruption can also be a violation of human rights. But also more broadly, other matters of human rights are easily attended to when there is access to information. So, on that end, I would like to proceed and mention to you some things that are in these laws before I can say something that are related to recommendations that I've made on the matters of right of access to information. So, the right of access to information Act 2013, in section 3, states that the purpose of the Act is to A, give effect to the constitutional right of access to information. B, promote maximum disclosure of information in the public interest. C, establish effective mechanisms to ensure that right. And D, for incidental matters. And the one I just mentioned now is in section 4, subsection 2, that says the right of access to Information Act provides for the right of access to information as fundamental to the fulfillment of human rights and is essential in fighting corruption. This week we are in week 2 of Lent for us Catholics. We're also dealing with matters of corruption. Last week was about family, a foundation for the church and society. It's a good coincidence that we are discussing this right of access to information at this moment, as it may help, even if it is not about Kenya. The matters are universal in many sense. So, this is helpful. There is subsection 4, or subsection 3 of section 4 of the Act says, the Right of Access to Information Act provides for the right of access to information held by a public body in accordance with the principle that such information shall be available to the public, that necessary exceptions to the right of access to information shall be limited and specific, and the decisions on the disclosure of such information under the Right of Access to Information Act shall be reviewed independent of the government. So, just having knowledge that a law like this exists is a good start. When I interviewed the Information Commissioner in 2016, it was a person there called Nicodemus Ajak Biar. I mentioned some of the parts of the interviews here in the book. And he told me some people do not know that there is such a law in South Sudan. So creating awareness is important. Because out of fear, people stay away. They don't even seek. They don't seek what concerns them, or what is even possible for them to obtain, what is legally guaranteed for them. That's because of maybe traumas of war, maybe ignorance. and it's just good. And having done this, and I believe through a lot of awareness, people should come to understanding that we are supposed to be civilized in this age, 2025. We could use non-violent approach to addressing issues. We could use what is available there as we seek solutions to our crisis. And then there is another part I want to mention here. Let me move to recommendations. On the recommendations, there was a recommendation I made that unlike the other two acts, the Broadcasting Corporation Act that has been mentioned in the revitalized opinion on the regulation of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan, and then it's the Media Authority Act, whereby by mentioning the institutions to reform, the agreement is already touched on those. Then, in relation to the right of access to information, they have not made any comment on reforming the Office of the Commission, the Information Commission, or anything to do with the right of access to information. So I find myself asking myself that why so? Laws in many places are not perfect. People continue to improve them. So why would they use this particular law and then suggest reforms on the others? This remains hanging. I left it in the book like that. But the reform does not include this particular law. And then I have the recommendations now of the board direct to it. I think the recommendations that I made that touch on matters of right of access to information. It starts from the recommendation number 14 in the last chapter, that the National Legislative Assembly should reform Section 35, subsection 1 of the Right of Access to Information Act and remove the minister responsible for information and broadcasting involvement in the process of the nomination for appointment of the Information Commissioner and his or her deputy. Media associations and civil society should have the power to direct and submit to the President a list of candidates from which the President can nominate the Information Commissioner and his or her deputy to the National Legislative Assembly for vetting and approval without the involvement of the Minister. That the National Legislative Assembly should reform Section 26, subsection 1 of the Right of Access to Information Act, which says the President may remove the Information Commissioner from office on the recommendation of the minister responsible for information and broadcasting. The National Legislative Assembly should be given the power to approve or reject any removal of the Information Commissioner. The National Legislative Assembly should amend Section 6 of the Right of Access to Information Act, which provides that every citizen shall have the right of access to information, including electronic records held by any public or private body. The provisions should conform to international law and best practices, and the right to access information should be granted to everyone, not just citizens of South Sudan. The Information Commissioner should issue a regulation on, amongst others, mode of pay and maximum fee payable to public and private bodies for cost of production of information as authorized by Section 12, subsection 5 of the Right of Access to Information Act. A replacement to the Deputy Information Commissioner who resigned in June 2016 should be appointed. The Information Commissioner should ensure that every public body abides by the terms of the Right of Access to Information Act, including Section 16, which stipulates that every public body shall establish an information office, designate an information officer, and ensure that members of the public have easy access to information concerning the information officer, including his or her duty, his or her name, duty, and contact details pursuant to provisions of the Right of Access to Information Act. And those are the brief recommendations that concern the Right of Access to Information Act. There is one there that's general about the course of laws. So that this is one of the other laws, but also to concern the Right of Access to Information. So it says the judiciary of South Sudan should be informed to operate independently of the executive and adhere to the principle of separation of powers and the supremacy of the rule of law, as that will, amongst others, guarantee justice to journalists and media houses in case of resort to the courts. Some of the topics, some of the matters, observations, or suggestions for the reform are matters that are universal. We've seen institutions on the African Union, even others along the lines of the UN Charter have been suggesting some of those reforms. So I made observations linking those suggestions that have been there before and with the reality on the ground given the follow-ups I've been doing. And then I came up with this in the sense that it's present and also it is universal. And then since we are talking now after publishing the book in 2019, and I'm not so sure about, for example, the office of the Deputy Information Commissioner. So maybe a replacement has been appointed. There was a time in 2021, I remember there was a new person appointed to that office of the Information Commissioner. Because the one there, Nicodemus, who I interviewed, resigned. And that was interesting because I also wrote an article saying something critical about that appointment at that time. I was able also to meet that person who resigned. Yeah. So in the moment, I don't know. I personally, as somebody who worked in the media sector, I had so many challenges. I've been sick for some time, so I'm not up to date with what is there at the moment. I'm not reading news regularly for the news sector here and there. And given my work, I was overwhelmed. People like you, or maybe when you go to the field later, you realize sometimes you become too overwhelmed, you can even get into psychological problems. Because information is not easy. Keeping a lot of information in your head, sometimes you digest, sometimes you even feel personally related to those things, and then you become sick. So I'm not too full of some things. I have come to discuss these to give an overview of what's in the book, and then share what also concerns you have that may relate to these topics. I intend to have further discussions at some points with people who are in other places on some of those things. These are many things in this book, and you cannot do them all at once. With that, I was going to end, and then hear from you things that matter to you most. These questions in relation to this, observation, something and then we continue that way. But I would not want to get many people talking and then I answer later. I think we do one person at a time. That can make the conversation lively and much more immediate. Thank you very much. Some engagements, and I just need to make some few comments before I think you have followed the discussion, right? I was very curious just to come to learn something about you, because as journalists, you should keep in mind that you don't necessarily have to work in Kenya to succeed. Some of you work, for example, BBC can post in South Sudan. And if you don't know the laws that governs media there, then you find yourself in problems. One of the questions that is predominant when you go for interviews, especially here in Kenya, they'll be asking about the laws that govern the media. Okay? So, from what I've picked from you, I've learned that even though we talk of media law, they are more or less like universal. As you leave this place, go and read the First Amendment. You're not even writing. And one day you like to work with CNN, you like to work with big media organizations, please think about the First Amendment. This First Amendment was ratified in the year 1791. You can imagine how many of you are alive. 1791. That is when it was ratified. And we talk about freedom of expression. Then think about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 19 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's also related to what he has talked about. This again, freedom of expression. Then think about McBride report. McBride, I don't know where they can. This was 1980s. Think about McBride report. What is he talking about? Access to information. Because he has mentioned quite a number of things in his country about access to information. And then take this to what they talk about. We talk about which article of Transitional Constitution of 2011 of South Sudan? Article 24. Some of you are just busy with forms. Yes, it's very important. You might take it for granted, but it's very important. You talk about Article 24. And then you talk about also some other subschedule ABC of access to information. Then finally, compare that to Article 33, 34, and 35 of Kenyan Constitution. Article 33, 34, and 35 of Kenyan Constitution. Article 33 is about freedom of expression. 34 is about freedom of the media. And then 35 is about access to information. Then all these should form a foundation for your discussion here in class. You know, when you're discussing with him about the Constitution. You will realize that even as much as talk about South Sudan, but we have similarities. And these similarities are pegged on freedom of expression, which is number one, access to information, and then freedom of the media.
Is that clear? So that's what the comment I have. So thanks very much for the presentation. I was just curious to come and learn about the Constitution, what it says about the media, and take away that I've learned about access, information, freedom of the media, and freedom of expression. So thanks very much, and I wish you a fruitful discussion on Nicholas. Okay? All the best as you proceed with the discussion.
Thank you. I believe it's your letter, right? Thank you. Good. I can see you are keen. Many of you have been attentive. I think all of you have been attentive. So I would like to hear from you. The title of the event is that a hand? Okay.
Talks about Chinese the media authority and journalists face in South Sudan. So what is the main challenge that the journalists face?
Main challenge journalists facing?
And media authority face in South Sudan.
Well, I would start by saying the question is more on matters of media authority, that is chapter 1. Though we are in chapter 2 about that, what is information. But I can give you a brief answer that at the time of completing the book and still with my practice, that was up to 2021, 22. That was the last time I was doing some work and media journalism. So the main challenge had been lack of peaceful environment. But when you know your country is in war, armed conflict, you are afraid sometimes. And being a journalist is not only you, even foreign journalists are there in the country. So the fact that people know that the country is in conflict, there is armed conflict, that poses challenges in movements, in thoughts about what you can do, so that maybe you don't anger some people. You see, some of the theoretical part of the practice of journalism tells us to be courageous, to be fearless, and the practical aspect is not exactly what is there in terms of the books. So people are afraid sometimes just even to travel around. So that is a challenge. With regards to the media authority, the media authority mentioned some things. I interviewed their managing director, managing director, somebody called the guy when I was 2016, and also the chairperson at that time, which is the equivalent of the media authority there in South Sudan. some of you are familiar with their work know that the experience go beyond that is what was there and was mentioned to me and I included in the book in relation to how they could make up their budget. Also the same with the information, the Office of the Information Commission, the one of the right access to information here, who was telling me the other time when included in the book that the government asked them to put a limit, a budget ceiling in their budget for a certain amount of money. That he was arguing that that money would not even be enough for them to do certain things. As Office of the Information Commission, because they would need staff, they would need people to be sent to provide information, sir. To provide information to those who are seeking information and so many other things. Yeah, so budget and conflict. And then others that I've also observed relating to having a functional judicial system that is upholding the rule of law. Because these civil matters, I say civil in the sense that they're non-violent. So when there is a dispute, where do you go to? You don't have to go and simply pay in the church, I think. You don't have to go and complain by repeating demonstrations or protests. When there are such issues, somebody is supposed to have a way to seek justice through the courts. And when there is mistrust in the judicial system, that becomes very difficult. So I see that there's a challenge, and that's why I pointed in the recommendations there that reforming the judiciary is also important, so that it is not anymore a problem of preference, that some people prefer certain things and they feel they can delay some people, they can delay certain work because it's not something they know. It's not out of choice. It is what the law is providing for. So reforming the judiciary helps so that matters of media are dealt with in the course of law. They are not just optional issues. These are issues of government and public matters. What needs to be done has to be done. And when it is difficult to do, the best option is to go to the courts. Yeah, I believe that answers you, unless there is something. Somebody else?
Just want to ask you, told us that you worked as a journalist in 2010 as a trainee, and in 2011 you were employed as the chief editor and reporter. How free was the journalists and the press in South Sudan, and how is it now? By the time that you were in the media at that time, in 2011, 2010, and at this time, how is it? How free is the press there?
Did you mention president now?
Not president, press.
President. 2010 to 11. In 2010, the Sudan was still one country. And from my practice until the time I was living, most of the moments were when the Sudan was one. South Sudan became a republic in July 2011, and a month later, I got enrolled at the Catholic University here, so I left the country to come and study law here. And so the experience at that time was not easy. At least for us in the South, there was agitation for freedoms. People wanted to be free. people were cherishing freedoms. So it was not a lot of difficulties for us to be able to carry a microphone, to go into the people. Because it is the people in the south who are calling for freedoms. And the north, there they were seen as the people who were restraining our freedoms. And so when I left, and even when we were working, the people were treating us with friendliness because they were saying that we are their people, we are championing their freedoms to become a republic, to become free people. So, and that came with a lot of changes because prior to that moment of semi-autonomy that the Southern Kingdom enjoyed, there were still calls for freedoms, but the situation was much more difficult. People could not express themselves easily before 2005. The media houses there were so few, and you don't hear people even being featured there easily. You don't hear critical voices easily. You don't hear opposition voices easily. You don't hear dissent easily. Now, the Southerners enjoyed a lot of those freedoms from 2005 with the signing of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement that was done in Nyayo Stadium until now, 2011, when we became a republic. When I left, I could even see now there were challenges coming up because the people are now with to that degree alone. Now they start to look around who is now being critical of who. Because to some extent the North was not there anymore. So if the North was not there, who is now seen as the oppressor? Who is now being seen as the one restraining the freedoms of others? And who is now the opposition? Those were the divisions that were coming up. And the free press at that time, starting from around 2012, I think, we started seeing media houses facing challenges. Some of them had to leave. And I think Radio Tangaza had to be, there was free voice, and then they found people working there. And then some years later, we were able to even see shutting down of websites. So the media environment between that time and now, a lot of happened that are so extreme, whereby we could see media houses not only being shut down, but also media personnel got lost, journalists died in line of work. And that has been terrible. So this because your question was broad.
Yes, my question is whether there are laws that guide citizen journalism or citizen journalism, because nowadays there is more of this group of people, citizen journalists, who are very common online. You find them everywhere, feeding the public with some information which is not true, and some people tend to believe what they are doing. In this case of South Sudan now, in this situation, there are those kind of journalists, that kind of journalism taking place there. What laws, according to your research and your book that you are doing, that guide their reporting?
Well, there was guidelines I used to see in some other countries, I think. I'm not so definite now. journalism ethics session. The media and all journalists shall adhere to a professional code of conduct in their practice. And another one here that says, no person shall require a government license in order to enter a practice of journalism as a profession. And there shall be no licensing or registration of newspapers, news agencies, magazines, and periodicals or other printed media or websites or sources of content on the internet, other than that required by law for any business seeking to engage in a commercial or non-profit activity. So, the Ministry of Justice in South Sudan is responsible for registering businesses. That is purely about having a legal entity. It is not to do with the content, it is not to do with the things that are mentioned there, just for the sake of having a legal identity. So, the guidelines that we talk about may be necessary for the group. This is a group, people calling themselves maybe certain associations, association X or Y, or they can be the ones to have the guidelines, but then for the purposes of their membership. And they can even call themselves associations or unions or others. Other than that, I see no law demanding citizens to have some guidelines or laws that are to guide discipline journalism. It goes back to freedoms because the individual citizen is free. So who gets to regulate the citizen to do what and how with their own capabilities and their own platforms. So it may be only if we agree that we are called certain association, we are called this group. Like I was seeing that in South Sudan there's Association for Media Development in South Sudan, or Windows, Union of Journalists. Those bodies have been there, they're very popular in the country. But somebody like me, I've never been their member. I engage with them sometimes when we were invited for workshops and others. And that was that. So you can see that I am not bound by their programs. I'm not bound by their guidelines if they have. So this is how when you later go to the field and you choose to practice, you see where do you go? Do you intend to go a certain group? Are you going to follow what they are operating there? Or you want to just remain yourself in front? Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Charles Khamala, Dean Faculty of Law, Faculty of University of Africa. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure coming here. Sorry, I couldn't be here earlier. Of course, our home student is industrious as a journalist as well as a budding lawyer. And a lot of experience.
That's a correction. I'm not still a lawyer. I'm still a student.
Excellent.
I'm a final year.
I read the back, and you see the last line says, he studied Bachelor of Laws at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa up to the final year, but he is yet to complete and graduate at the time of publishing the book, correct? So, of course, out of solidarity and out of duty as well, I'm bound to be here, like just across the road. Only that when Rogers Morgan asked me to come, I didn't know that I was in court just now. So, otherwise I would have been here at the beginning, but I'm glad to be able to share, and it sounds, I've never been to Tangaza before, I'm impressed, I must say. Not only by the architecture, also by full house, I didn't quite know what to expect. But carry on, don't let me interrupt, I know it's a launch, but of course, I'll contribute when an opportunity presents itself. But thanks. Would you like me to do anything or say anything?
I was welcoming you. I've noticed your entrance.
Yes.
It is significant.
Oh, yes, I'm one of the crowd. But of course, if there is something to add, I'd be happy to share.
The program was intended for 2 hours, and I believe we have now used about 1 hour 20 minutes or so.
Yes.
And then I have finished presenting.
Yes.
And receiving questions or comments or concerns
Yes.
in relation to the topic, which is the book title Freedom of Expression
Yes.
and Media Laws in South Sudan. The
Yes.
focus is the right of access to information. Laws. Because the laws are made from the international level and not to the national. Because some people I think go even now to other levels below national.
Counties.
Yeah, counties and provinces. Yeah, so that they can put up some measures to provide information, which is a good thing. So those are laws and what challenges may be there. Achievements. We talk about achievements. I forgot to mention earlier. When I was doing articles about the implementation of those laws and things, published them. Because I was a daily reporter. I was working for a newspaper as a freelance journalist, newspaper called Nation Mirror. At that time, I made the initiative to go and interview some of those individuals, handle those bodies. And the findings at that time was that even they did not have sometimes offices, like the Office of the Information Commissioner was so happy that they were able to rent office space and they had a logo. And that was an achievement for them. They found that they were made by the law, and the much they achieved was having an office space and having a logo. The logo and the budget that was approved by the Council of Ministers, and then they were going to be approved by the legislature. So when we talk about achievements, that was an achievement at that time for them. Now I don't know, but I think we have made some things also. We have made some things. So we look at those achievements, challenges, and opportunities. Opportunities around those issues of the laws. I think some people look at the opportunities in the sense that they can also start an organization that can further awareness on those issues. Because these are broad topics that when somebody is able to come up with projects to create awareness, to disseminate the information that there is this law, or to train people on those laws, and to make access to information, even information that is private. If somebody wants to get the ID, the birth certificates and other, those are information about themselves. The government has some of those information, and the people have the right to access the information. So if people are creating awareness on that, that is also opportunity. So this is why I use the word opportunity. That within the laws there are also opportunities for starting up organizations, opportunities for doing something, for doing a project. Yes. Thank you.
Support the whole notion of access to information in the African context. And of course, the youngest state in Africa, the youngest country, 2011. And of course, we know a little bit about the history of South Sudan. It was part of Sudan, and then there was a struggle. John Garang was a freedom fighter, and 2005 his life is taken because his helicopter crashes on the border with Uganda. And in the region and in Africa, first of all, there is a special context about the fact of state formation. You see, perhaps if we took 400 years or so, we could evolve into states the way Europe did with its conflicts, and then you now get Germany, Portugal, Italy, and so on. But in our context, we were colonized, and artificial boundaries are created. And the purpose of colonization was the extraction of resources, marketing external goods. And that context is important because it then explains why the state is artificial in Africa at independence. For the 1960s and then coming to 2011. And we'd have hoped that many of the errors or the challenges which confronted the initial colonial states would then be, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. South Sudan will be able to say, wait, this is what happened in other contexts, how can we not repeat the mistakes which other countries made? So Africa had about 100 coups within 30 years. That is the strength. Because there are pressures for secession, immediately because we have so many ethnic groups. There's the Nuer and the Dinka. Unless there's a national identity created, the immediate task of the post-colonial state was, how do we fight imperialism? Because we have been dominated by the imperial project. And then how do we prevent balkanization or fragmentation? Biafra is going to leave Nigeria. Katanga is going to leave DRC. Somalia is going to get Greater Somalia because northeastern frontier is going to leave Kenya. So you have a strong centralized state which is militarized, and the enemy is not so much repression of human rights, but being colonized. And then we realize that this strong state is problematic because it is trampling human rights, and we come to our second generation. And in Kenya, there was also repression of the media. There was a one-party state, domination of broadcasting, print media, censorship. There was an open sedition, which was, many of my colleagues suffered with that. And yet, when you think of democracy, you're supposed to, what is the work of an opposition party? To bring government into disrepute. You're literally saying, that is your task. What is the government doing? How are they spending their money? What are they not doing? Are they legitimate? That's the function of opposition. But that was in a one-party context, and one party is most justified. You can imagine, I know, that's the time I was giving university. When you get people like Nairobi Nairobi Monthly, and many other publications being banned, and people being incarcerated, trumped up charges, contempt of court charges, if you continue publishing about what are court proceedings. And so the incumbent one-party state, instead of legitimizing itself and trying to create a democratic base with public participation, which is now the watchword. And public participation then implies the things which somebody has been saying, that how can you participate unless you have information? How can you participate unless you can express yourself and persuade people about peripheral views, which is the function of the media? The government and broadcasting, national broadcaster has the mainstream views, but there are alternative perspectives, inevitably, because we are diverse. So everybody has a different perspective, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. A democracy literally encourages falsehoods because you cannot know in advance what the truth is. So some falsehoods have to be there, and then you debunk them, and then you reach a better version of the truth. So when I came in, now there was what was being mentioned and what the question that has been put forward about, okay, but then we also have disinformation, fake media, and defamation, reputations to protect, and even in the day of social media. So there is a balance, and therefore you now have the role of the law in balancing between not imposing excessive defamation punishments which will chill and will all keep quiet and will all pretend, and therefore will not solve any problems, because problems require dialectic of thesis, antithesis, then you get a new synthesis. But if that's not happening, and it's deemed to be healthy, but if that is not, freedom of expression is not protected, then of course you have crackdowns and repression. I have studied a little bit, I've never been to South Sudan, I want to go, but I supervise students who rate on the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, and I know the situation from 2015, first of all 2011 to 2013. 2013 you get conflict in a young state, and then Comprehensive Peace Agreement 2015 coming to 2018. Now you have a fragile situation, but there have not been elections up to today. So 2011 until today, the difficulty in Africa is, I'm not not exclusive to South Sudan, but South Sudan is typical of the pattern repeats itself everywhere. Legality without legitimacy. So you're legally in office. If you look at the election, legally, the electoral body has satisfied that a candidate has attained the eligibility requirements to hold power and to tax and so on. But that is law. Legitimacy, when you ask the people, are your views being represented, are being taxed correctly and so on, you now get questions or legitimacy questions that 60%, 70% of the people are saying, wait, de facto, we are not happy and so on. So there becomes a disconnect, and as the outcome, you now start using force and repression because of lack of legitimacy. If you have legitimacy, you can use persuasion because you are respected. But if there's no legitimacy, crackdown.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Just how much time do you have now?
Okay. I'll
And
close.
then I was also interested, since you deleted the book from yesterday, after the lecture you gave me.
Yes.
May you say something about having read the book?
What I said, what I read just 20 pages. So I read pages 86 to 94, and then I read the last, another 10 pages at the end, because those are the pages that have to do with cases. I mean, the other parts, I looked at them as, I saw an extraction of the provisions of the media legislation, and those are, to me, it's fairly standard. The question is then, how does the court interpret? And I saw Canadian journalists being ejected from South Sudan and so on. Because you've just been saying now that there are no requirements to be a journalist and so on, but there are foreign journalists who have different perspectives and reports. So I noticed that you have discussions on decided cases. From a lawyer's perspective, I'm not a journalist, so that is where I focus my interest. So, what is the role of courts in protecting journalism would depend on different traditions. I can say, and this is now simply to create interest in purchasing the book and by analyzing it for yourself, because the book speaks for itself. In countries like America, the West, it's maximum freedom of expression, which is, you know, as students of media. In Europe, it's halfway. In other words, right to reputation, right to dignity is privilege, so they can censor. Censorship is permitted in Europe if it is demeaning human dignity. Then you come to Islamic states and Oriental states and then Africa, where, if I was to say a word about Islam, you can't caricature Prophet Muhammad or things like that, because it is religion has, you can defame even people who are not alive. So the question for Africa is, where does it find its footing in that continuum from expressive freedoms and then are they permitted even with extreme political freedom, or is there a role for the state to regulate extreme political freedom? Finally, to conclude, and I will be critically analyzing the book from that perspective to ask myself, is democracy permitted to protect itself? That is the key watchword. If you allow our good friend Miguna to swear in a prime minister and it appears like treason, and yet democracy will say, wait, democracy can protect itself from extreme political freedom if a candidate says that when I come to power, I'm going to abolish democracy. So when I come to power, will be an Islamic state. That's what Turkey says. Or such fundamental challenge to democracy. Democracy believes that it can censor such expression because it is too radical. I wanted to point that out because there is a role for the state if it believes that it wants to protect democracy. However, that does not mean now overreaching and therefore harassing and intimidating and punishing journalists without trial. So, an analysis of the law, again, I've been looking for that, and that is the judgment itself, the court. Lastly, I've read about the case of, there was somebody called Jagdet Dak. I don't know if you know Jagdet Dak. Dak was in Kenya, and there's a time he published a post on Facebook praising Ban Ki-moon. Ban Ki-moon had, I think, he dismissed a Kenyan general, Onyeki, who was in charge of the UN barracks, because of some. I think the troops entered that barrack.
2017.
Yes. The troops chased, I think Salva Kiir chased Machar into the barracks, and therefore there was some insecurity at that time. But Onyeki was in charge of those barracks, so he had to be dismissed. So that praised Ban Ki-moon. And then I remember Kenya renditioning that to Juba, where he faced treason. He was already running as a refugee here, but that was ignored, and then he was given the death penalty after Sharia trial. And of course, after now the reconciliation between Machar and Kiir, he's now released, and that was one of the bargain. Yes, but the point is, yes, you can see that was a form of expression, because he was expressing his opinion on Facebook. Then Kenya did not respect his right to non-refoulement and rendition. The same for your good friend Kizza Besigye, attending a book launch of Martha Karua, senior counsel, rendition, facing a military trial, and so on, where he may face the death penalty again for alleged treason. So I just wanted you to know that is journalists have a mantra: publish and be damned. In academia here, we're just publish or perish, but that is an academic. But
Well, do you mean that was a journalist?
But that published on Facebook, but that was citizen journalism in the sense of, and of course he was an opposition.
Yeah, he was
Figure.
when they spoke up for Real Madrid.
Yes.
And they were just out from Cuba, so he came to Kenya.
Yes, in Lovington here.
Yeah.
Yes. And he was not favored with any proceedings because the extradition should be proceeded by, you go to the magistrate's court. In fact, you can't transition somebody to a place where he's being persecuted. So that is when I say publish and be damned, it's almost like journalists get what they have to say out there, irrespective of the consequences, because they aren't.
At that time, Kenya was not friendly with the opposition of South Sudan.
Yes.
For example, Dr. Riek Machar did not, I think, have friends here. In the government of Kenya, he was seen more of a friend to Raila Odinga.
Yes.
And then James everything here, and also supporting him still. So in fact, not only Kenya, but within the region, Dr. Riek had difficulties. He had to be even protected in South Africa.
Yes.
At that time. So it was more than just simply that. But then the government at that time, Fred Matiang'i was the Minister of Interior. It may be something that the ministry knew more, and the Ministry of Interior was more responsible for what happened.
Yes. He faced a trial in a court which he didn't speak the language. It was in Arabic, and then again he didn't have a lawyer. Then he got the death penalty. So I was sympathetic to how we could do that to an individual. The same history repeats itself in Besigye. It will be a different trial. It's a military one. But again, Besigye is not a journalist, but he had come for a book launch similar to this. So you can see that it appears that expressing your subjectivity is an innocuous thing because these are your thoughts. But such is the struggle for human rights, I suppose. It's so dangerous.
This is an interesting point in relation to human rights and also the right of refugees or people who are seeking asylum.
Yes.
To be returned to where they ran from.
Yes.
And even beyond that, how that may not even give a bad image to the Republic of Kenya as being people who are and protecting, or maybe even putting the people who are running to settle down in more danger. Because I think the judge had to find intervention. Maybe it was God who protected him more than. But to be taken from here to Juba and then face those challenges.
I thank you.
Then we are winding up. The sister said we had the 2 teams and we have been exhausted. And for you and for her, maybe she say something. Let me conclude. There was a point I forgot about the relation between the right of access to information and the Office of the Right of Access to Information Commissioner and the Media Authority. So the provision here of Article 45, or Section 45, subsection 1 of the Right of Access to Information Act gives the appeals board that has been established by the Media Authority Act the powers to handle pleas filed by a complainant. That complainant will be the individual citizen, public or private body, against the decision of the Information Commission on access to information matters. So it's like checks and balances. If somebody is not satisfied with the actions of the Information Commission on matters of information, they may go and seek intervention from the Media Authority, which is like the Media Council here. I believe we are even the laws here. So you know the Media Council. So there is called Media Authority in South Sudan, the equivalent of that body. And then further, the article, the section 59, section 1 of the Media Authority Act says the Media Appeals Board shall comprise of 3 members, 2 of whom shall be at least a retired judge, and then blah, blah, blah. Those are the qualifications for the people to be members of that Media Appeals Board. And then section 59, section 2 of the Media Authority Act adds that the Board of Directors of the Media Authority shall submit through the Minister responsible for information and discussing the names of the people to be appointed with the Appeals Board. And then the President let us work with the national legislation already. And then my conclusion here is that at the time of completing this book, at the time of writing this book, the Media Appeals Board had no appointment made. So that remained something that was not completed. And it's a concern because it's like having a structure that is incomplete. How do you complain? You have an issue, but you cannot complain because the body to complain to has not been set up, has not been put in place. So that makes it important to implement the laws. And I commend you for the implementation that needs to be addressed. So with that, I would wish to end here. And thank you very much for being with us. I would also suggest that you go and read this document that we have for land. There are some proposed actions on matters corruption for this particular week. Things to do with examination of pensions, things to do with reflections on some biblical verses, because they are related. We talk about right of access to information, also as they help us in realizing human rights, fulfillment of human rights, and also in fighting corruption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can you capture the glass? Right. Capture the glass. Once again. Yes, I want to acknowledge and thank you so much, Robert, for giving us your time. I know most of you have enjoyed the presentation. Yes. I hope you have enough time to ask all the questions. Yeah? Just to conclude, let me ask, what has really touched you with that whole discussion of 2 hours? What are you going home with? One
1 word, 2 words. What are you going home with? But I'll start to, as a media person, as a journalist, as a citizen, of this country, or a citizen of South Sudan. What has touched you? Yes.
What I can say is that the similarities of the law here, of law in Kenya, some similarities.
Yes, there are some similarities. We are still in the same continent. We are even neighbors. We are under laws and governors that are almost with the same culture. What else? Yes? Done. Yes?
But you should be careful about the freedom of the expression and the amendment of the Constitution.
Okay, good. So we should be cautious and careful how we use the freedom of expression, the freedom of the media, and also to be conversant with our Constitution, as well as if we sit at the table of decision making, we also have to think of how we contribute to that. Yeah? Yes, Thomas?
I've realized that it is very important to know the media laws that govern different countries in our continent.
Thank you. The media laws. We have similarities, and we also have some differentiation when it comes to country, depending on their leadership structure as well. So that is very important. Anything else? The last one. Anyone? Yes.
In what the lawyer said, legitimacy you can use persuasion. As much as you like to say, how does it apply to journalism?
Persuasion. Yeah.
Legitimacy you can use persuasion. So how is legitimacy coming to apply to journalism?
So that's what you have taken home. Yeah. What is a question?
It's both a question.
Oh, it's a question. You have to ask the lawyer in the house.
Yes, sir. That's why we are here. But yes. Just say it again.
We have said legitimacy you can use persuasion. So how is legitimacy coming to apply to journalism?
Okay. Journalism. Can I say this, or can I ask a general question? Of course, truth is a good thing. In Catholic University, we say consecrate them unto the truth in the Bible. So truth is, because if you deal with falsehood, you eat poison, you walk off a tall building, because you think you can fly. So truth is good. It helps you survive. However, surprisingly, politics thrives on what I call mendacity. Mendacity are lies. So I don't ask why. It's almost like the public likes lies. You see Donald Trump there, half of what he said, in fact checking, 60% was wrong. And people are clapping, people are voting. So what is the role of a journalist? You see, you have to tell people that, hey, you people, if these are your interests, and you want your votes to get your interests, then actually you should be voting this particular. This other fellow is his real background, and this is his track record. If you vote this, you're likely to get this. So if somebody, at least it will keep the public or the people knowing that they are going to get what they choose. Many leaders say a lot of things, but it's only a critical journalist who can expose and remember, become the memory of society to say, this happened in the past, this is so-and-so's track record, and these are the falsehoods that are being perpetrated. The choice is yours. Because the journalist is simply a messenger, but and a record keeper. And people try to obfuscate because it's in their interest. If I can bluff everybody, then I can have all the wealth in the world and all the power in the world and use it to my own interests to the detriment of society. So it's a very clear role that journalists have in terms of informing. And there are people, there's an agenda to conceal. It's not an accident that people conceal truths. They have an interest in wealth and propagating self-interest. I hope that at least sheds light that it's not okay to sit on the fence and say anything goes, even if I perpetrate false news and so on. No. False news makes a bad society and a bad world. And anybody who is perpetrating false news, that should be exposed. Because it makes a good society, good choices, and it's a better place.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
The copies of the book are available for people who may want, and they sign for them. It has been selling at different rates, and the recent rate, I think, still stands 2,000 shillings for a copy. So those interested, and if also at other points you may want, and not today, there's also a store in town called Luria. They will have a copy, so I'm not sure if I'll continue to keep with them as I intend to travel very soon. But also you may check with the food store. And then on the internet also, I have my social media accounts.
Okay. So you can get a copy of 2,000 shillings
Yes.
from you, or you can get in some bookshops. Yeah? So, yes, thank you so much.
And I have sweets for you people.
Wait,
Let's conclude.
so, just to add to what our today's lawyer Lewi has mentioned about persuasion and the question of persuasion and legitimacy, put in mind that journalists are supposed to be persuasive when it comes to storytelling. And as he said, it's about enlightening the society of the happenings of individuals who want to be leaders. Yeah? Who want to be public figures, who are going to sit at table and make decisions about you and you. Yeah? So if we don't expose the truth about these people, yeah, then we miss the point when it comes to their position in your country or in your nation. So we have a responsibility. Yeah? And remember also persuasion goes to people who are going to work in the PR offices. There's a lot of persuasion when it comes to public relation. And for those who have read that, the course, yeah? Persuasion is key at all costs. And persuasion with the truth, for us journalists, is unquestionable. Just put in mind that at the end of the day, we are both accountable by our code of conduct. Yeah? And truthfulness, your honesty, your accountability, your transparency, for the good of the country as well as for you propagating for the democracy of your country. You have no choice but to stand for it. Yeah? So those are just a few of whatever he has talked about. Can sign for you. So thank you once again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much everyone present here for your time, okay? For giving him an audience where he can hear people to talk to, people to engage to, and also to emphasize what the content in his own book. So you get 2,000 shillings. Are you selling this? Are you selling the same price out there? Why don't you work on for students?
In fact, if you look at the rate of Amazon that I increased, it is more than this by verified. It's at $117. So I even question myself why in Kenya that is around at $10. And then outside there.
So you want to keep it at 2K? Okay.
It's fine.
All right. So, thank you so much.
Also, this is important for you that what happens between a self-published book and a book published by a publisher. So, since I self-published this book and I have a publishing company here that designed for me, with that conditions, I paid them for design. And I put their logo at some points as a favor, then I started removing. So you can see that because I have a copyright in my name, I'm free. I can print as many copies as I want. I can even change the design of the cover. And this is what you may notice that
some of the copies of the book has this logo, and some does not, some do not have, some do not have. Inside here you will see that it says without permission from the author. Some books say without permission from the publisher, because they are bound by law to be under the publisher. Mine, the copyright is in my name, so it says without the permission of the author.
Okay. That's clear to us, and I think it is time we need to move on to another session for our classes. So thank you so much for that. Thank you everyone in the room. I will get to know your full name.
Oh, I'm Charles Khamala. I'm the acting dean at the law school.
Great. We are all much Thank you.
And sister
Anne.
Anne.
Yes. So thank you people, thank you everyone. Where are the sweets, please? But before the sweets, let's just thank God for the day. And then please just remain seated. We share it quickly as we move to another class. So let's just pray the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Father, we thank you, glorify your holy name for the gift of life, for the gift of this opportunity, and for knowledge and wisdom that you granted to each one of us, and especially for the gift of Roger amongst us, and for the effort and the desire to share knowledge and wisdom that comes from you. Father, we thank you and we glorify your holy name. Bless us as we live and continue to enrich us, always in all the things that we would like to have in life and our desires of our need. Make this prayer in Christ our Lord. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay. Please take sweets. I'm giving you a break, like 15 minutes, so we have in class at 11:30. I'll give you some 15 minutes, okay? 15 minutes, then we will meet at our little room. Is that okay? Then someone can assist you to do breakfast. Please, sure. No, we can't make all of us there.
So I have to sit and sign the book to give another strong.
So starting there,
I think we are more by far. We are less by far. So you can take it.
Can I finished? Yeah, you can.